Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. And with these panelists, fasten your seatbelts. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Day 2 of the ARC. Some we've seen in the UNIDO session this morning on heavy industries already in the City Hall. Others are new here. It's a pleasure welcome you all to the Central Library. Nice location, hopefully not too hot yet. We have an exciting panel that's going to take place just now, and I'm about to introduce the moderator, but let me say 2 words in advance. We're co-hosting this with Competentia. Birgit Fraser is in the audience. Competentia is an initiative of the three cities in the so-called Bergische Städtedreieck, representing around, I think, 650,000 people, supporting women in leadership, especially in business. And so it's a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much. Please make contacts with her after the panel as you please. And we are still missing one panelist, which will arrive who will arrive shortly, because another panelist we had foreseen, unfortunately, cannot make it today due to an illness. And so without further ado, I will introduce Jessica Neumann from UNIDO ITPO Germany, correctly, but located in Vienna. Jessica is an investment and technology expert, promotion expert, and she was at UNIDO in Vienna, the gender focal point, has been, and she just told me, once you've been that, even after 2 years it changes, you'll always stay that by heart. And so we have an exciting panel here. We have such great leaders, and I would just like to give the floor to Jessica. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you all.
Thank you. And maybe a round of applause to the host. Thanks, Peter, for your introduction. While climate change impacts everyone, I think we all know that it doesn't impact everyone equally. Marginalized groups, vulnerable communities, especially those people who use natural resources for their livelihoods, they are hit harder by climate change. Unfortunately, women and girls make the majority of those who are displaced due to natural hazards like floods, droughts, and hurricanes. So the UN actually estimated that 80% of those who are displaced by climate change are women and girls. So I guess we cannot deny the fact that climate change does have a gendered impact. But women are not only victims of climate change. Their involvement and their leadership is essential for climate change adaptation and mitigation. Did you know that companies with women on boards are actually more likely to reduce energy efficiency, advance greener processes, and innovate environmentally sustainable alternatives? In fact, it's 60%, they are 60% more likely. And not only due to that fact, companies with more women on boards are also 47% more profitable than their peers with lower amounts of women on the boards. So let that sink in a little before we start with the discussion. So I guess you can figure that it's no coincidence that it's an only women panel today, featuring the inspiring careers of 4 Cleantech leaders. And why are we bringing in those leaders and those role models? Because UNIDO truly believes that creating an enabling and diverse environment where women can be agents of change to mobilize climate solutions is an important step in having a just transition and in leading an environmental sustainable life. So welcome to my panel members, which I will now introduce, and I just see our 4th panel member also coming in. Yes, warm welcome to everyone. So I guess it's going to be a fun hour we're spending with each other now. So please welcome with me Miss Trizer Omugar from Kenya. She's the winner of the prestigious International Climate Protection Fellowship and is a researcher on energy and climate change at Wuppertal Institute. Thank you for making it, and thanks for Deutsche Bahn for being on time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Our second panelist is Mrs. Bibi Abimbola Olufore. She made her way from Lagos, Nigeria, all the way to Remscheid. She's an international development professional in energy transition solutions, and she's heading the Investment and Technology Promotion Office in Nigeria. Thank you for coming, Bibi. Then next on the panel, we have Mrs. Ariesta Ningrum. She's the team lead and for technology, policy, and strategy and at UNFCCC, and you made your way from Bonn today, not so far. Thanks for making it. And last but not least, we have Mrs. Anouk Campbell. She is the president of the Decentralized Energy Canada, and maybe you can tell us a little more about it later, because we didn't have the time to prepare. Great. So let's go to the first round of questions, if I may. I would like to start with Ariesta. Can you tell us how you started your career in the cleantech world?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for the introductions. And I'm very, very pleased to be here with extraordinary women. I don't consider myself extraordinary, but anyway, here I am. And thank you also for FCA to invite me to be in this panel. Yes, I studied or educated as a chemical engineer. That was back a long time ago. I'm from Indonesia. It's a developing country. In case people do not know, it's the third most populous country in the world. Fourth, I'm sorry, most populous countries in the world. And then I came back to Indonesia and worked for government agency on the applications and assessment of technologies. But I was not happy there because I think I mentioned to you that among the 40, 50 people in the divisions, there were only 2 women. And of course, there was a little bit of imbalance in terms of the treatment as well as the opportunities for professional growth. So I went to study engineering, environmental engineering, and I came back and worked with the NGO and development of renewable energy business in Indonesia. And that's where I came to know of the climate change as well as the Kyoto Protocol's clean development mechanism, which is a mechanism that helps developing countries to get involved in greenhouse gas emission reduction projects. And that's where my engagement with a lot of technology issues, of course, is focusing on mitigation, which also then later on brought me to UNFCCC Secretariat. And then subsequently I moved to another divisions, and I'm dealing not only with mitigation now, but also with the adaptations technologies. I know that we here is looking on the high impact of mitigation technologies, but I think we do need to have also a balance and see the importance of adaptations technologies. I think I stopped there.
Thank you. Yeah, we love balanced perspectives. That's also why we're here and having you on stage. Then I would like to continue with Anouk. How did you find your way into the cleantech sphere?
Well, you can imagine it wasn't a tidy journey. It was a little bit of there and there and there and there, trying to discover what I wanted to do. But I've always had, since I was very young, I've always had a fixation on reduction of waste and noticing a lot of waste in the world. And I was probably about 12 or 13 when I thought, we really need to do something about this. And having the comment said to me that, well, humans are just a drop in the bucket. You know, we can't change the earth. We can't change the environment. And as I got older and came out of high school, I thought, no, I don't accept this. I think we need to figure this out. And actually finding a university degree or course I wanted to take was interesting. And I landed in geography, because geography is the resource management, looking at the interaction below the surface, on the surface, in the air, water, soil, human, social, cultural. It covers everything. It's a very fascinating program in retrospect. I really enjoyed taking it. And I think after I came out of that, I had a much bigger picture, full systems thinking, developing in my mind how to approach problems, how to solve problems, how to collaborate with people, understanding that we can't be experts in everything, so look to the others around you that have those expertise, which actually came in very handy. So I did some postgraduate research in the co-combustion of coal with biomass, looking at waste residues. And I worked with the Fuel and Energy Department because they had the science and technology for emissions calculations and kinetic modeling for what happens when you mix biomass with coal. And for me, that bigger perspective, okay, well, where are you getting the biomass from? How are you utilizing it? How can we make this most advantageous to our local resources? I found it very fascinating, and I found there was a lot of pushings to, no, let's bring the wood chips from Canada. Sweden's got wood-fired facilities, but we're going to bring the wood chips from Canada. I thought, oh, this is not going to go well. And of course, they're combusting in these, half the feedstock's combusting in the hulls of these ships coming over, and I'm thinking, this is not right. So I think right then I decided this is a commitment I'm going to make. And I went to work for local government in the United Kingdom, helped them set up the energy efficiency advice centers, learned a lot about double glazing, gas condensing combination boilers, sold them at the B&Q, and didn't like that at all. But I did learn about the residential energy efficiency side of things and what buildings can contribute to emissions and how you can reduce that and what tactics you can use. So after that, I came back to Canada. That was in the UK. My first degree was Canada, then UK. Then I came back to Canada, and I thought, I don't think I belong in government, because there's a definite restriction that some of us can't operate in. And you need that creative freedom to be able to take your own risks and take accountability and ownership over what you're doing. So I bravely, 21 years ago, bravely went and started up the first National Industry Association for Decentralized Energy in Canada. And the first 15 years were pretty quiet because North America, as you know, is a bit behind. So there was a lot of pushing, a lot of boardroom doors that were closing very fast behind me. What are you talking about? Decentralized energy? Do you know where you live? You live in a place of gas and so much cheap power. Why would you be telling us to buy more efficient, locally, distributed energy systems? Because it makes sense, and you can reduce waste, and there's a longer-term goal. So that's how I ended up here, and I'm enjoying the ride now. It certainly put me through the ringer a few times. You've got to make your own money, you've got to find your own team, you've got to find good people to work with that have share the same commitment, and aren't looking for the oil and gas $190,000 a year salary with vacations and healthcare memberships, or health clubs, club. But it's tough. It's been tough, and I think there's other not-for-profits at this event that can easily share that same story. I don't think it's a gender thing. It's just tough when you go in and try and do something yourself, and without any funding behind you, you've got to stand up, and so here I am. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, I see a lot of nodding also among the women on the panel. We'll come back to your entrepreneurial journey and the Valley of Death, how they call it.
Did I cover it all?
No, I think there's lots more to discuss. Bibi, I want to know, where does your passion for lowering the carbon footprint come from?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, it's still morning, sorry. So I started out my career in the oil and gas, and I was exploring for oil on the North Sea. I was processing data that was all oil related, and then subsequently I started to question why we were not harnessing gas, because we had wells that had high gas-to-oil ratios being capped globally, because the focus was on oil. And so this questioning led me into a group of people that started looking to harness gas for energy. And while at that, I realized that a lot of gas is being fled, especially in countries like in African countries where the regulations are not strict enough. And I got to work and advise the government of Nigeria on gas flare commercialization, which is just using gas, harnessing gas to, I mean, there's energy poverty, and then we're flaring gas. It's a double whammer. Nobody does that. It doesn't make any sense. So why should we flare gas? And people are living, you know, without electricity. So we started to look at ways in which we're going to bring in third-party SMEs, people in the solution space, to look at how to take this gas that has been flared and wasted and convert it to electricity or energy of some form. And this is also kind of like an economic empowering opportunity for the country, where we needed to push more people into entrepreneurship, and people that are even willing to be entrepreneurs would not be capable of doing what they want to do just because of the sheer lack of electricity. One of the things that NJIU said this morning was about, you know, we get donations for oxygen machines, but there's no electricity to power it. So at the end of the day, it's either you die or you die, right? So the options were really terrible. And so getting into that space, I went out of, against the wishes of my bosses, I went out of the technical career line to do a master's in, I did an MBA and I focused on energy at the Warwick Business School in the UK. And I did a dissertation on the low carbon future. And similar to what you said, when I got back to Nigeria, it seemed like I was speaking Greek, because when you start talking about, you know, conserving energy, they're like, why would you even conserve energy? We don't even have the energy to conserve, right? And I was talking about aviation, you know, using biofuels in aviation. And it just seemed like I was in a different planet completely. And this informed, you know, my further and exerted interest in this area. And that is how I'm here today. Cleantech is one of the most exciting things for me, because the range is vast. And we go from waste management to harnessing gas to even the issues around Africa and the Western world. We know that we haven't fully equipped ourselves with energy, so we still need some reliance on fossil fuel. But one of the biggest learnings for me and the biggest advocacy that I do today is, in as much as we will still depend on fossil fuels and gas, within this transition period, it is to ensure that the dialogues are happening and the solutions are being attracted, you know, with technology, to ensure that Africa focuses on learnings from the Western world on how to harness natural resources, but harnessing it in a sustainable manner that will not spiral down into, you know, high carbon emissions. And for me, that is what I think we need to do in the next couple of years. Hearts, minds, get everybody into thinking that even, yes, if you want to drill this well, how do you drill this well sustainably? If you want to explore for gas, how do we do it sustainably? Because as Africa, we're not actually, our contribution to the carbon footprint is below 5%, but our opportunity is in doing what everybody has done, but doing it in a smarter and more environmentally friendly way. That would be all for now.
That's already a takeaway, I think. Please note it down, everybody. Wonderful. So we're closing this introductory round with Trizer. What encouraged you to actually apply for this climate protection fellowship that you won?
Okay. My motivation has been multifaceted, ranging from my personal life experiences, work experiences, as well as educational experiences. My educational background is on environmental science and policy. I did an undergrad in environmental studies and also mastered in environmental science and policy. And on my work experience, I've done a lot of development and policy work in Kenya and East Africa, even here in Europe, around climate change adaptation, climate change governance and policy, renewable energy, gender, name it. So I've had to learn a lot about the environment in general. Coming to my work experience, when I was in Kenya, I worked a lot with the communities, but also got to experience energy transitions from my family and even the communities around me. Just seeing households transition from using kerosene for lighting and cooking to using solar and even grid connection was kind of inspiring, but also I had questions how this can be done sustainably. For instance, in my country, Kenya, the current total national energy production is at 80% renewable energy, which is very commendable. But at the same time, we ask ourselves, in as much as we have this much renewable energy, especially from geothermal, hydroelectric power, solar, and wind, energy poverty is still defined as very acute. For instance, there's issues of accessibility, issues of reliability, affordability, and even just basic availability of energy. And as we encourage communities, and especially off-grid communities, to transition to renewable energy sources, using maybe standalone solar house systems, we ask ourselves again, is it enough? Is the transition only for lighting, really? That is not just, right? It cannot really just be enough to transition to solar home systems and then we say we've done enough. So again, now how are we going to ensure that we have enough energy for our continent, for our communities, and for productive use? So currently I'm doing research on energy transition and energy poverty nexus at Wuppertal Institute, and I hope to learn from my fellow women, to learn from us all, to ensure that we all transition justly to a better and sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you. You've showcased that, you are truly an intersectional environmentalist, I would say. I want to go back to Anouk and ask about the Cleantech startup environment in Canada. You've mentioned it already. It takes a long time to become profitable, especially for Cleantech ventures, because commercializing complex innovations from academic research is difficult, and that's what is often referred to as the valley of death. And another challenge is that they are operating in highly subsidized markets and often distorted markets as well. Does that sound familiar to you? Is that the case in Canada? Maybe you can tell us more about this.
Yeah, it's my experience with the startups, and over half of our members are startups, ranging from inverter technologies, energy storage, software as a system, interoperability, microgrid controller, stuff like that. So that's the type of companies we work with. Traditionally, it's been really tough for those companies to make it within the domestic market. So our early companies, like the first 10, 15 years of doing what I'm doing right now, mostly look to export markets. Some of them went public too early because they couldn't access the financing, and I believe there's a big issue in educating the investors in North America on what is a good bet and what is going to have long-term success for you and what's the next thing. You know, it's hard to get a whole, and I'm based in Alberta, which is an oil and gas economy, and getting the investors to shift from the type of returns and the length of time it took for those returns has been a really big job. And we're finally, if you'd asked me 3 years ago, 4 years ago, how many of your companies have received Series A financing, I would have said none. None. I don't know any. That's all friends, fools and family, $250,000, $500,000, maybe some government funding, maybe a maximum of $1 million, which is a lot from the government, though, federal. So you have to jump through the hoops. You have to be really organized to gain access to that type of money. There's no freedom for creativity, experimentation, failures, really. So, but in the last, since January, 6 companies in our membership that are startups have received between $11 million and $250 million. One of the companies, Hydrostore, out of Ontario, got $250 million from Goldman Sachs. Our whole industry, which all know each other now because we've been around for a while, it's kind of going, wow, what has happened? And we had an investor forum May 31st in Calgary, and some of the investors came, Roy Nat, Scotiabank, OKR Financial, stood up in front of the room and said, you know, this is a kind of like the buyer's market. It is time for the entrepreneurs now. Every deal we are seeing is oversubscribed. So if you're in this business of innovation and entrepreneurship, get out there now, go look for money, because the money is on the table and you can get it. I don't know if that answers your question. I've kind of forgotten the question.
Very much so. I like the point that the money is there. We just need to find it and distribute it equally. And that brings me to my next question about access to finance. So we all know that timely access and reasonable interest rates are key for the creation of a thriving clean tech business. But then for women-led SMEs, there's often additional hurdles. They are less attractive to traditional banks because of discriminatory land and property laws and lack of collateral. So I'm wondering, Bibi, what is ITPO Nigeria, our sister office, doing in Nigeria and across the continent to actually ensure that women-led startups and SMEs are getting access to finance?
Thanks for that question. I'll answer it first by talking about what ITPO Nigeria is doing very quickly in 1 minute, and then go on to answer the question on access to finance for women. So basically for ITPO Nigeria, we're representing the government of Nigeria, or rather implementing government funds to ensure that we are able to facilitate public-private partnerships on clean tech solutions, which is kind of like contextualizing it to this festival. And within the free trade area that was in Africa in 2020, most of the African countries ratified the free trade agreement. So we have one congruent market now called the AFCFTA. We're looking to also promote investments in technology that will drive the fourth industrial revolution and industrialization, basically. As said this morning during the session on heavy industries, industrialization is inevitable. And in Africa, in doing that, clean tech is what is going to fuel the sustainability required for the growth that is imminent. So we are looking to promote clean tech innovation in oil and gas. And I think somebody mentioned that even though we have the heavy industries, one of the key players and key stakeholders that should be pulled into these conversations that we're having is the oil and gas industry, because they are large contributors to, they have a stake to play in mitigating carbon footprint. So I think we should be expanding these invitations to include them, because they need to be a part of this conversation. So collaborating with UNIDO on the Global Clean Tech Innovation Program, we will be facilitating SME financing and bringing investors and solutions together. Specifically as it relates to women, we know that we have the subconscious biases, and we also have norms, societal norms that limits women in every way. So when it comes to like land rights and things that women require for collateralizing finance, it does not exist for most African women. One of the things that we are doing is advocacy to mitigate these by ensuring that we are educating the financing bodies, the corporations, the institutions, and even the women themselves, educating them on how, to lower the barriers to this access. And we're doing it by one of the things that ITPO Germany was instrumental to is the formation of a course called the Gender Lens Investing. And this Gender Lens Investing course pretty much exposes, or it kind of like just, for the Gender Lens Investing, we have a course that's developed that's looking at the subconscious biases and the discriminatory norms, and looking to how we can mitigate them. So in engaging commercial banks, in engaging even microfinance banks, we need to help the people to understand why we cannot structure investments and funding for women with a set criteria that is not pragmatic enough. We need to actually look at structuring this funding, taking it from the female perspective and looking at it, specifically from the point of probably a northern woman, for example, that is in Puda, that's not allowed to open her, to unveil herself. She may probably not be allowed to walk to the bank to seek these loans. How do we make sure that these institutions are putting these factors into consideration and making the loans attractive and also accessible to women? When we take it upscale, we look at women-led enterprises, and we find out that even in venture capital funds, only about 11% of women are accessing these funds. And you ask yourself why. And a conversation I was just having this morning is because women usually just think themselves by default not qualified, and we don't step up. So how do we work with women to ensure that we can help them to step up? How do we create networks and communities similar to what you have in Canada that is amplifying the confidence of women to access these funds, and also teaching them how to utilize the funds? Because it's one thing for the funds to be available. It's another thing to know how to utilize it. So how do you utilize the funds? And very importantly, getting women to focus on the solutions that will attract funding normally, such as Cleantech right now, and to also get women to attract the help that is required to help them to scale in whatever it is that they're doing. So ITPO Nigeria would be working with all partners here, everywhere, whoever you think can contribute to this for us. We're ready to partner, to collaborate, and leverage synergies to make this happen for African women. Thank you.
Thank you so much for pitching the Gender Lens Investing course, which is one of my babies. And I hope next time when we meet, you will be all wearing the Gender Lens. I'm always wearing it, but you can just not see it. So having looked at climate change and entrepreneurship through the lens of gender, we want to now look at climate change through the lens of intersectionality. We all know that minority and low-income communities are more likely to be exposed to things like toxic waste, landfills, and other environmental hazards. And you are, Trizer, the co-founder of a network called the Climate Beyond Borders. And with that, you're trying to ensure access to scientific information to anybody, right? Please tell us a little bit more about it. You can pitch the network if you like.
Oh, sounds interesting. I've been struggling to define myself professionally, and intersectional environmentalist will look good on my CV. So thank you for helping me find that. Generally, I think we will all agree that our environment is very intersectional. It ranges from nature, environment, energy, name it. And as an International Climate Protection Fellow funded by Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, 12 of the fellows, we decided to do something more than just doing research, which will end up in scientific papers that is only limited to scientists and experts. So we thought that maybe we need to also ensure that this information that we produce gets to the end users, our communities, our grandparents, our mothers, our business people. Are they also able to understand these knowledge products that we produce? So these 12 fellows come from across the globe, and we are all coming from different sectors, and we all have different expertise. We ranging from myself, and in the energy and climate change space, we have architects, we have engineers on board, we have lawyers on board, we have various types of experts. And at the moment, we are all producing our own different scientific-based knowledge products, but we also want to ensure that this knowledge is synthesized in such a way that anyone is able to quickly grasp whatever it is that we are trying to share across. And at the moment, we produce 3 podcasts on various topics, and we're also still in the process of registering our company, and in future I think we'll have a broader visibility, but please do check our LinkedIn page. It's called Climate Beyond Borders, and support us the best way you know. If you know of any organization that provides capacity building or even funding, feel free to reach to us. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you so much for using that opportunity, the stage, and for building networks. I think this is a nice bridge to Ariesta, who is very active in the climate negotiation sphere, where a lot of people come together and need to find common ground in a way. No? And women have experienced, unfortunately, unequal access to networks for a long time. And missed a lot of labor opportunities, mostly because of care responsibilities that were not equally shared. So that affects, of course, career choices by women and also retention rates. And actually there's a study from an institute in Denmark that says that the role of mentoring for women is more important than for men, and that found that women rather stay in engineering when there are role models and mentors, while men are more driven apparently by the financial aspect of the engineering job. Anyways, I want to know about the climate negotiation sphere. Do you find that there's inclusive negotiations possible in the year 2022?
Yes, the answer is yes, but we need to work a lot on that. Just probably share some of the statistics that, for those who probably not aware, that every year our office UNFCCC is actually supporting the intergovernmental process on climate change. And some people might be wondering, what are you guys doing like year in, year out? Just negotiating on the text and so on. But don't forget, this is the only forum in the world where every country has the same voice. So whether you are Palau or you are United States, they all have the same voice in these climate negotiations. And this is also the only forum where the climate, and also now is actually we're discussing not only climate related as an environment issue, but also including just transition, the gender, and the connections to all other issues. That's all being discussed here. So this forum is very, very important. And of course, one of the elements is also sharing experience, but also making sure that those who voice out the concerns on behalf of countries, those who voice out concern on behalf of the constituency they represent, whether it's women in gender or youth or environmental organizations, business organizations, are heard and are being taken into consideration. So I'm just seeing that there is since the beginning of the UNFCCC process, there has been like a slow increase in terms of the gender representations. For example, only 40% of the representations that goes and negotiate on climate change process are female. This is very, very slightly increased from last year, which is only 0.2%. The heads of delegates, so those who are actually making decisions at the crunch of negotiation, there's only 27% represented by women. And beyond that, which is a bit more, we're also working with the panels and expert bodies underneath the climate change negotiations, and one of them is the Technology Executive Committee that me and my colleague Andrea support. It's unfortunately, it's still dominated, or the gender is still imbalanced, so there is a 20% female and the others are male. And very interestingly, I mentioned about adaptation earlier. The expert bodies who dealing with the adaptation, like Adaptation Committee, also the loss and damage. I don't know if you ever heard about this loss and damage. Currently is a crunch issue also on the climate change intergovernmental process. There are better gender representations, female representation is there, but not on the technical bodies like the Technology Executive Committee, the executive board that deals with the greenhouse gas emission reduction and the Kyoto Protocol, and some others. So let's call it like a mitigation-oriented body. So it's very interesting to see the adaptation-oriented bodies actually have a better female representations than the mitigation one. So I hope that we can change of that. But I'd like to also take an opportunity to mention that our two last executive secretary are female. So Cristiana Figueres is a very inspiring role model for me, myself, and I think many of the colleagues also share that. She's the one where working hard and drive behind until the adoption of the Paris Agreement that really impacts the way we look at the climate. I think there is already something happening before, but Paris Agreement is really the one that's sending a strong signal about temperature goal, about the finance goal, about the adaptation goal to everyone in such a way. I heard you saying the last few years, why suddenly it goes up. You know, that's because the attentions to climate is getting more and more. And this is, we need to all contribute to this to help that the climate in the context and clean technology as part of solutions for addressing our climate crisis still in the agenda.
Wonderful. What a statement for gender equality. Yeah, we are almost done. We can now start our last round, and if there's time afterwards, we can also take some questions from the floor, so get ready. Just one more time. Higher level of inequalities in countries actually make countries more vulnerable, to the negative impacts of climate change. Please keep this in mind. So we talked a lot about how to bring in more diversity into the negotiations, into the businesses, into policy. But what else do you think needs to happen to accelerate climate change mitigation and adaptation? Maybe think about what you as leaders want to do, but also what future leaders should do, and include also, of course, what to address to male leaders. Thank you. Trizer, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. That's a very deep question. Just thinking on top of my head, I'll just regurgitate what most of us have already said, that the cost of doing nothing is greater than the cost of doing something, right? But particularly for developing countries like mine in Kenya, I think to accelerate climate change action, we actually do need a lot more financing, a lot more of financing, especially for the energy sector, and less bottlenecks from multilateral financial institutions as well as other granting bodies. Additionally, I think we do need a lot more of research and development and to ensure that there's diffusion of innovative solutions. What alternatives are we proposing to fossil fuels that are also accessible, affordable, and reliable? Reliability aspect is very key for renewable energy sources that we are really advocating for, because if they're not reliable and they're not accessible, then it beats the point of really advocating for communities, off-grid communities, to transition into using renewable energy sources. Thirdly, I think we need to create more spaces, deliberate and inclusive spaces for women, young people, the marginalized communities, persons living with disabilities, to take space and to make decisions that affect them, right? Please, men, create more spaces for us. Ensure that we don't have more of manels. We need to have more such forums where also women get to tell us, get to share their lived experiences, get to propose solutions, and also get to act on these solutions that we are proposing. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. You can pass on the microphone to Bibi. You have one. Okay. You go.
Okay, fantastic. So what I'd like to see in the next 2 years as my advice to leaders is less talk, more action. A lot of times we congregate like this in festivals, conferences, and everybody says laudable things that we all go back to our offices, to our businesses, and that's the end of the collaboration. So as we are here, we should go back and and even ensure that our connectivity, our collaborations, our synergies are more. I would want to see like actions and targets, like in the next 2 years, for example. We want to see a thriving ecosystem of Cleantech, where we have universities that are funded for R&D. We do not want networks, you know, in Canada to wait 15 years before they get attention. We want, so when we all imbibe this ecosystem attitude, then UNFCCC will know who needs, what negotiations need to take place, and what SMEs need to get funded. Venture capitalists would be able to identify SMEs with solutions, startups that need funding. We want governments to also be within this ecosystem, simultaneously tweaking regulations and creating or developing policies or enhancing policies so that there's market adoption for the solutions that are being created. Because part of the things that frustrate startups is you come up with a solution, but regulations, you know, it cannot be adopted. No matter how well-meaning these solutions are, they can't be adopted because the regulations are not in your favor. And when you try to check why these regulations do not exist, it's because there is also a lack of understanding and comprehension of why the regulations and policies need to exist. So capacity building, skills development, we want to see national institutions, service providers, large corporations, the heavy industries, the oil and gas, all within this ecosystem working together. When we look at our goals, SDG, 2030, are they achievable? Probably not. But then we can decide that we will, take the critical sectors that need SDGs to be achieved, and we will accelerate our actions and everything required to make sure that we achieve. If we're not going to achieve it 100%, we should have a marker like, okay, 70% minimum criteria, for example. But we all now know, through COVID, thankfully, that collaboration is better than competition, and we need to hold hands and help each other to just, cross the line. Western world, Africa, developing countries, emerging economies, we all need to work together, and we can't just be together just at conferences alone. When we get to our offices, these connections need to happen. We need more networks that will be facilitating to ensure that these connections are sustainable as well, because if we don't sustain the connections, then we can't deliver on a sustainably clean future. So for me, that's what I have to say. So fund R&D, policy provisions, and I think I heard Mark, we need to drive energy intelligence, promote skills enhancement, especially being deliberate about the future workforce. We have solutions that are being developed. We have artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and everything that will define what the next industrial revolution would be it in Rwanda or in Russia. We need to get the workforce ready. We need to start tweaking how the education is being deployed in universities and what is being taught, so that we will have this workforce that's ready to also to make the clean tech future a reality for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Bibi, for drawing up your paradise and also explaining how we get there. So that's exactly what we need. Ariesta, do you want to go next?
Okay, thanks. I think Bibi has summed up the whole conversation for this panel. So break the silos and start with our mentality. I think we heard yesterday from the gentleman from Club of Rome, everything is about the perspective, including how we view our human fellows living in the same world that we have. So once we have that, we will have the feeling that we are all sharing this problem together. Walk the talk. I think Bibi has already elaborated on how to walk the talk. And start from where we can start. I even start from something that's small, not to the government leaders, but for FCA, for the next event, let's try to have a gender balance event. The tech that I support has already, in 2021, in all events, we have all gender balance in panelists, basically. So would look forward for the improvement in any capacity that we can. Thanks.
Thank you. You have the final word.
Throw a little wrench in the works. So I've got regulate, visualize, and diversify. Remind me if I forget one of those, because I have short-term memory issues, a pandemic brain. I never thought I'd say this, but regulations, like, you know, you're younger, you're creative, you're ambitious. Regulations are just barriers. They're delaying progress. And now I found myself standing up yesterday kind of going, they've got to ban waste. You've got to ban garbage. And I actually do think the regulations now have to step up more than ever. But I don't think, so we're working in regulations now a lot, and we haven't done this in the past. And they are truly boring. Like, honestly, it is you really have to be a legal mind, a policy mind. You have to be able to wade through all of this paperwork, which gets pretty trivial when you kind of look high level. But it's not trivial if you're the person connecting the solar module to the roof and the fire department can't find the visible disconnect. So I get it. I understand. But what we're grappling with right now is how do you integrate sustainable development goals into regulations and standards? And it's a really tough. You're kind of going from safety certification, like straightforward certification, safety, technical standards, and you're bringing in a really quantitative angle that people are uncomfortable with. The traditional standards and regulatory professionals are really uncomfortable with this. So we're trying to, I'd love to figure out how we can grapple through that and figure out good ways to measure, monitor, that become a part of a company's annual. And you're probably doing it over here. Again, I'm coming from a North American perspective. So it's if we're doing it over here, I'd love to hear about it. Visualize, I say visualize because I truly believe that in order for us to change the way we need to understand what the consequences of our actions are, and it can't just say it. We need to see it. So an example from yesterday for the garbage, if we all had to put our garbage on our front step and we were given a shovel and said, you're going to have to bury your garbage, get rid of your garbage, because you've got these big machines that's going to dig a big hole and put it, we need those pinch points. So when I say visualize and regulations in the same breath, I think we need to come up with metrics, or what are we willing to tolerate and what are we not willing to tolerate. And so if we're not willing to tolerate plastic or 70% of our energy fuel going as waste, these need, I'm speaking very, like, it's ambitious. What I'm saying is visionary to myself, and I'm so proud of myself for getting there. But if you ask me to help you how to do it, it's going to be really hard. I'm with you, and I'll sit down and I'll try and work on it. But use those metrics. We're not willing to tolerate that. We're not willing to tolerate getting off of the underground in London and blowing black out of your nose. Like, eventually that's not going to be good for your health. So what are we not willing to tolerate? Then sit down and figure out, you as an entrepreneur and innovator, somebody said yesterday we have from Martina, we have these technology battles. Like, oh, it's my technology is better than yours. Oh, you think it's all going to be solar. Oh, you think it's all going to be natural gas, combined heat and power, small modular reactors. Well, no, let's stop talking about that. Let's just say, does your technology meet the metrics, the sustainable development metrics that we've come up with? And if so, we will support you as much as possible to make sure that the regulations, so we still have the green hydrogen certification, and definitions is a massive thing. Understanding what a microgrid, a nanogrid, a mini grid, green hydrogen, pink hydrogen, red hydrogen, it's a really important thing, which I think is a bit easier to resolve, except getting industry consensus might be difficult. Final thing, diversity. Okay, I'm going to throw this out there. We have an all-female team. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. And I never thought I would ever say that I had an all-female team. The diversity is really the key point, right? Like, we're missing something in our team. And I suppose a word of caution that we get too caught up in this numbers of there's 50% women, 50% men. I don't know how to address it. I know I do want that diversity and that inclusion and that accessibility. But I do worry about what happens if we lose the dynamic, because together with the mixed gender, whatever gender means in the future. I was on a gender equity panel about 4 weeks ago that said, you know, tell us about what you think about gender equality. And I said, well, first I'd like to know the definition of gender. Like, I mean, it's a very fluid thing now. What if in 10, 15 years we don't refer to people as he, she? So anyways, that's my, you know, diversity I think is really important, because we can really slip the other way fast, where all of a sudden you're working with all female teams, you have no male contributions, and I think that would not be good. Blah, blah.
I can relate. I used to be a business owner of an all-female team, and we did not survive. So I think diversity of mindsets is very important. Now, is there a question from the audience? Just want to make sure that also other perspectives are maybe captured. But if not, there will be time for you to discuss with the panelists, I hope.
I have a question for, I've forgotten your name. Oh, yes. So sorry, pardon. Is it Trish? Trizer. So in the female space of entrepreneurs presenting, or what is there also a behavioral or a psychological, do you know what I mean, like the way that people talk to each other and how women come to present their ideas? Is there something in that you think is because I think it's in the Western world. I think a female will pitch her company very differently to a male, and I think that has issues with investors who are so used to listening to it being pitched a very aggressive, a very confident way. Is that something similar in Kenya, and where you?
I'm not sure if I got the question correct.
Is there a communication style that women have in presenting their companies for raising money that it becomes a barrier to them?
Yeah, I think a lot of us women struggle with confidence. When we have excellent ideas, but we tend to cow down a little bit and not want to feel like you know your stuff very well, right? You might be a professor or something, but in such a setup, you might get a little bit anxious. I suffer from social anxiety, so yeah, I think it cuts across the whole world, right?
Thank you. Yeah, we can, of course, discuss later also if you, especially the younger generations in the audience, have interest in learning more about their career paths, then please feel free to reach out. I want to end this panel with a bit of a provoking question or statement from Mary Robinson. She's the former Irish president and UN Rights Commissioner. She said, "Climate change is a man-made problem with a feminist solution." I'm putting this out there so you have some food for thought to take away. I hope we all agree that gender equality and women's leadership are indeed crucial for climate action and climate-smart solutions. Thank you so much for you leaders for having inspired us in the audience and to allow for diverse perspectives on future panels. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you so much, everyone, for this inspiring panel. And allow for a couple of final comments and logistical details for all of you, of course. When I tried to do, when I was still a student, I tried to do a PhD on climate policy and technology, and the only professor who was daring enough, I told that yesterday over dinner, to take this topic, because that was unusual at the time, was a woman. And I'm so thankful she was the one who went forward with that. I also fully agree on what Anouk said on the mixed teams. That's really something nice we're enjoying. We'll be working on the gender balance. We tried hard this time. I would like to stress the effort some experts are taking, and one has just entered the room. She started. She's not noticing it. I'm addressing her, but she started this morning, very early in Brussels, to come to the aviation panel. It's Eva One. Please stand up so people can see you. Maybe she's opinions and the different backgrounds. So Thank you for making this possible. Thank you for coming over, and looking forward to seeing you all on the next panels. Thank you.
Thank you.